This is a production of Cornell University.
Thank you, Carl. And yes, Pam, aren't we all grateful for this guy? He definitely outkicked his coverage, marrying Sally and having these two wonderful boys. A scary time for Carl, and thanks for everybody for keeping us updated. And man, what a story! He's making the local news. This is quite a thing, Pam. Have you seen him?
We FaceTime at least 3 times a week. We FaceTime
Nice.
each other. He FaceTimed me when he first got out and he had a beard, just to show me his beard before he shaved it off.
Well,
So
anything would help this ugly mug.
he came back to work on Monday.
Oh gosh, of course he did, because
Yeah.
he wants to go back to being global turf.
He does, yeah.
Yes.
He does. He's doing really well. He was on a ventilator for 15 days, and I told Carl it's about hope. It gives you hope. So,
and we're so glad that you are giving us play-by-play activities of your backyard. It looks like they were actively reading the pool instructions while you were lamenting the trampoline killing the grass. And Brian Winka confirmed that, yes, the trampoline will, in fact, kill the grass. And then Kobe Schmucker upped you guys, went all in on the trampolines. 5 hammocks, hillbilly social distancing. Maintaining a sense of humor, Pam, is really very important during these times. And really to help the grounds folks, the sports folks along these lines, the STMA has just done a spectacular job in providing resources. One of these that we talked about last week is one I'll highlight. There's a couple more that we'll get to as we go on. Let's do a quick recap of the weather before we get to a conversation about sports turf management. For those of us in the Northeast, you can see we remain well behind normal. Now, this is going to change dramatically over the next week, but with the warmth will come copious amounts of rainfall for us in the Northeast. Art DiGaetano, our climate specialist at the Northeast Climate Center, was talking to us about a rain event that precedes a tropical storm. And so that's what we're going to be experiencing. He's not as worried about the tropical storm, but it could be large swaths of anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4 inches throughout the northeastern U.S. So while the temperatures will begin to warm and we will start to see some change to this, they're really not going to be much more than normal. And so we'll remain behind. The amount of degree days will accumulate, base 50-degree days, indicating the amount of time above average temperature is above 50 degrees. You will see some improvement, but not a huge dramatic shift. There will be some temperatures in the 80s expected. Now, if you started to plan your things at the end of March and early April in the Northeast, you saw back in April that soil temperatures were already creeping into the low to mid 50s. A month later, again, it looked like it was surging on. It hadn't moved that much. And as of recently, we still aren't very much further ahead. We're slow to come along here. Now, of course, where Pam is out in Ohio, it's much further ahead. Certainly down in southern Ohio, it's got to be a little bit further ahead than we are up here. But you can see soil temperatures are really not driving things. Now, to me, one of the fascinating things about this is that there needs to be, let me see, did I get this in the right place? Yeah, I got this in the right place. There we go. Pam did a wonderful job with the team there, Ohio State, the Ohio Sports Turf Managers Association, right away out of the gate, because, of course, the growing season is enhanced, further ahead than it is here. Right away, you got these top 10 maintenance practices to focus on, particularly as we were confronting maybe not being able to access the field. Now, more recently, the STMA has, of course, responded to this, and a recent publication came out, Healing Through Sports. I thought this was really good, sort of compiling things. And our colleague, Pam and I's colleague, Grady Miller at NC State, was asked this question because apparently there were people in the sports turf world who all of a sudden couldn't access their fields. Now, of course, this is a Bermuda grass field, but the question to Grady, that Pam is also a columnist in the Sports Turf magazine, answering questions as well. The question is, well, what do I do if I can't get there for months. Well, I put just a simple answer up here because with Bermuda grass, yeah, it's not great. It's probably going to take a few weeks to get it back. But if you get it at the right time, when Bermuda grass can sort of rejuvenate and grow after a scalping, you're likely in good stead. But cool season turf, abandoned to some degree like this, even sports fields, you see the fields starting to grow now in the southern part of the state. You can see the infield skin beginning to get weedy when you're not allowed access to the field. Obviously, recovering these things are going to take enormous amounts of labor and care. And of course, one of the things everybody's going to tell you is, if your fields went into this pretty good, hopefully with just some minimal maintenance, they'll come out of it pretty good. And that's been a pretty consistent message that we've seen. But Pam, you wrote this really great article recently about thresholds for acceptable weed cover. We talked about this a little bit last week with Sorokin, but what I think this highlights to me are a couple of tools I want to talk to you about with regard to this idea of, going out, looking at your fields, getting a sense of how they perform, and using tools to communicate that to the people that we work with. So here's the STMA Excel spreadsheets playing condition index. Here is your report card for rating athletic fields, trying to quantify sort of how we do things. And here's our really simple sports turf rating system that we have on our sports turf site. Now, I'm not partial to any one of these. I think, sitting down at a conference or listening to this and saying, okay, well, I can see how to use this tool. And really, I have to say, Pam, this is the question I have for us to chat about today I've been alarmed at the amount of people that are struggling with just being able to do essential maintenance. They're not able to justify even accessing their fields. So are you seeing much of this? And let's start there. Are you seeing much field abandonment, people not realizing what they have to do?
I'm seeing it at all different levels. So I have a friend who manages a professional baseball field, and he doesn't have any fungicide, and there's been a lock on buying anything. So that's his problem. And then I have, local school district and local park and rec facilities. The grass is 6-8 inches tall. Infield starting to get weedy. My local school district, I've noticed they have come out and they've mowed to try and keep it somewhat manageable. But yeah, I think it's at all levels and at all different types of sports.
And does it have anything to do with us not being able to talk to people about what we need to do? Or is it they just shut it down and they didn't want to hear from anybody?
I think it's probably the latter mainly. Budget freezes, hiring freezes, interns let go. Those decisions were made very quickly by administration without the input, I think, from a lot of field managers. So I think with it just being an unprecedented time, those decisions were made really quick.
And as we begin to reopen up, do you see a role for going out and assessing the field? I mean, some people are going to say, listen, we're not playing sports. What do we got? We'll get to it in the fall. How can you think these tools will be useful in helping people communicate the things we have to do up the line?
Yeah, I think we have to concentrate on the big three. We have to say, look, we've got to do mowing. We've got to mow. We've got to control weeds. And then depending on your situation, it might be disease control or insect control or irrigation or fertilizer, whatever it is for your particular instance. But I think you need to, rather than try and do everything, just concentrate on the 1 or 2 or 3 of the basics.
And this has been what you've developed to guide these decisions. Now, is it your sense that guys have been able to do these things? So you're saying there's a range. Obviously, losing ground on Bermuda grass at this time of the year might be able to be made up. What about the cool season guys that are coming back to 6-inch turf?
Well, I think we're trying to get the message across that, mowing is a stress. So because we mow so much, we have to do the other things, irrigation, fertilizer, pest control. If we're not mowing, it's not under as much stress. We can also back off those other practices. So I think just having a mowing plan and being able to communicate that mowing plan will be key. It's the cool season grass isn't going to die if it gets to be 8 inches tall. You've just got to have a really good plan to bring it back to your original height. So whether that, using rotary mowers, maybe even taking clippings off so that you don't have, tons of clippings on the field, maybe work with some volunteers, try and help you mow more frequently. Because I don't see, unless we've got sports on these fields, I don't see the staff levels coming back up. And that's another issue, is manpower. There just isn't the people to do the mowing because they've cut seasonal staff.
Yeah, the seasonal staff is where the loss is going to get hit. Now, as an aside, I know you're active in the Scouts, and I know that STMA did this really nice thing with Scouts. I know that Nicole with the Orioles is doing some STEM stuff. This is happening to try to connect the youth to this industry. Do you see this as a really opportune time? It seems like you're doing it at home with the kids, you're doing it with the Scouts. Is this a really opportune time when our staffing levels are low to use that time to get people involved? Communities have sports associations. Is there a way to use them to help get back and do things safely if we don't have the staff? What are you seeing about the connection between this brewing enthusiasm around this as a STEM area of study and the potential for it to help us moving forward?
I think it's been a wake-up call for us all in academia that our student levels are down in the industry, and we're trying to look at all different ways, all innovative ways that we can connect with youth, whether it's through Scouts or STEM videos or going into schools or going to FFA events.
FFA.
Yeah, 4-H. I mean, it's all there. I love what Nicole's doing. I've seen a lot of people doing the same kinds of things. They just don't know we exist. We just have to keep getting the message out there that this is an industry that exists. I'm teaching a plant science merit badge to 100 Scouts right now across the nation. 6 o'clock every night this week. We come on and we Zoom. And there's a section in the plant science book about careers. They have to look at plant science careers. Turfgrass isn't even mentioned.
I'm shocked there's a plant science merit badge. It's such a, the fact, years ago here at Cornell, we used to have to do marketing just to teach kids what plant science was, that you could actually study plants, and never mind at the specialized level we're at. Now, it seems so obvious. A lot of us work at schools, right? It's been a wake up for academia, but at the same time, students in high schools, getting them involved at that age is going to help build this later on. But we have to reconcile that with, as soon as times get tight at various places, unless you're at the highest level, it's a very different industry. There's only one how many people at these facilities, right? What's happened at the U, where you are at the Ohio State? What's happening to the sports fields there?
They're being maintained still. So Brian Gimble and the crew are staggering times coming in. They're still being maintained.
And synthetic and natural.
Yeah, we've got synthetic in the stadium. We've had it in there since 2007, I believe. Our baseball, varsity baseball synthetic, and our rugby's synthetic. So
so he has a lot of synthetic turf, all infilled?
Yes. Yeah.
And so so one of the things that happens is the municipalities, the school districts, the lower level things have fewer resources, but really that's where a lot of the jobs are. I feel like we're having a hard time getting those people to value the professionalism. And I see in your report card, one of the questions you ask is, do you have a certified sports field manager? And I just think that isn't prominent enough in our industry to demonstrate the professionalism you need to manage these fields at a high level.
I agree. And I think it comes down to the type of people who are in the industry are typically hardworking, humble people that don't like to, toot their own horn, whatever you want to say. But we've got to do it. We've got to put a suit on, look smart, talk to people. When we went to the Women's Forum STMA years ago, we looked at the lady who wrote she was the CEO of Facebook, and we were given a copy of her book each. And she says, sit at the table. If you're invited to a meeting, sit at the table. And I keep telling sports turf managers this: if you're invited to that meeting, you go in that room and you sit at the table. You don't sit on the edge and keep quiet. You have a voice. Sit at the table. That's the message.
Have you found that these field assessment tools help bridge that gap?
Oh, absolutely. Data is power. Absolutely. Data is power. If you can go and you can say, look, we've gone from 30% weed cover to 80% weed cover this during this pandemic, we have to do something with it. Numbers tell the entire story. Data is power.
And we talked about that last week with Sorokin. As weed populations increase, the traffic tolerance is not going to be good. Now, I know you mentioned in your article about microclover, right? This is going to be a buzz, a buzz. I keep saying it. It's a funny pun, but we don't want clover on sports fields.
I think the issue with it is the big issue, and I was listening to Paige Boyle's webinar last night, and I know she's on tomorrow. One of the challenges with it is that you can't control other weeds if you've got microclover in your mix.
That's right.
How do we, that needs addressing, the wear tolerance of it, the mowing quality of it. I think at 10%, probably it wouldn't, what percentage is a good percentage, and how do we control other weeds? Those are some of the challenges with it.
Well, and clover's not one that plays nice. It starts out sort of interspersed and then it gets clumpy. Yeah. And one of the things we've talked about consistently in these webinars with Chase and with everybody else is when an athlete plants their foot, if one spot is markedly different from another spot, they're either, if they don't sense it, there's a higher likelihood for injury in those situations. So anything that gets clumpy, and weeds are one of those things that might not be as obvious, could then lead to problems with safety. So let me transition to safety. I've been pounding on it. We've had a number of people talking about it, but gosh, Pam, no one's got a click. It seems like no one's taking this data at the various levels. What do you think is one of the ways we're going to be able to have some success in getting these fields looked at as an aspect of school or player safety?
It will probably come through some kind of legislation or being forced to do it. I think usually it doesn't happen until we have to do it. In Columbus Public Schools, we've got 17 high schools, and so that's a lot of schools to get tested. That's a lot of equipment. They just don't have the money. The only budget item they have, the only line item they have for sports turf management at our district is mowing. That's it. Nothing else, just mowing. So how do we get the message across that it's important? I think it'll come through legislation. Someone will get injured, and it'll be something we have to do to keep the youth safe.
Has that led to the preponderance of more synthetic turf in your mind? The idea that I need more people in it. Somehow if I get synthetic turf, I don't have to, quote, it's no maintenance sort of thing. And, as professionals, I'm speaking as devil advocate, but I wonder if that's not the logic that they use to get synthetic turf is, well, I just need less guys.
Absolutely. They don't have to worry about it. We put it in. We don't have to stress about it. We don't need to maintain it. It's just it's something we can build and walk away from, and everybody can sleep at night. That's the misconception.
And it wouldn't. So, when you talk about 17 high schools in Columbus, Ohio, and I know what they feel about football and sports in Columbus, Ohio, the fact that all they budget for is mowing, they must have a fair amount of synthetic fields on those campuses. Yes? No?
They don't. No, because they have to all be treated the same. So if they install one, they have to install 16 more.
what is the well, that's that, and every time that's a huge capital expense, and that's been the argument for the long-term investment you make in a natural grass field. Now, I'm an advocate of having a synthetic field to flex to when the weather's bad, when the lacrosse team wants to get out there and it's snowing, particularly in our neck of the woods. I like it as a flex field, but not as a routine field. But if you put a lot of traffic on sports turf, even sand-based fields, Pam, practice fields are going to get worn out.
Yeah, yeah, they do. There's a certain level of wear that you can put on them, but for me, the balance is, as a sports turf person, but also as a parent, I don't want my kid playing on something that's 150 degrees in June, July, and August. I don't. I don't want my kid breathing in whatever's coming off the crumb rubber. And, the science is not, the EPA's released whatever they've released and the science isn't there. But as a parent, I have those concerns and they get hard. There is maintenance to them. They're not maintenance free. And over the long haul, are they economically sound for, if my local high school puts it in and it costs them over $1 million and it only lasts 8 years, they need to start looking at the numbers a little bit more than they do, I think.
Well, I think it's partly because of what we're experiencing, that somehow natural grass has challenges that are alleviated by getting the synthetic turf. And you bring up an interesting point, and you wonder, as the role you sit in, both as a parent and as a leader in the sports turf world, how would you like to be approached by sports turf managers as a parent? Do you think even parents notice the quality of some of these fields their kids play on, or just like, okay, go play, leave me alone?
I don't think they notice it. I don't think they see it. They don't notice it. They don't. I stand on the sidelines and I grumble about, some of the fields my kids play on, it's 100% prostrate knotweed. So by October, it's completely brown. And they're playing on bare dirt and knotweed and brown knotweed. And it's just not a consideration until I say something. And then they're like, oh yeah. Like they don't see it.
All right, Carl, we got some questions.
Yeah, there's a good one from Brian here, and it touches on a couple things we've already talked about. He's actually a baseball coach, high school in Illinois, and he said the maintenance people who cut the fields there are really more of a general maintenance person. He says they're electricians, auto mechanics by trade, and coming out of the winter, it looked like they went from they had about 7 inches of Kentucky bluegrass, and they just kind of scalped it right down to 1.5 inches. It was white, and so now he's got a situation where maybe it's just coming back. He's wondering what kind of suggestions you guys would have. And then maybe another question is, how should he go about talking maybe to administration or the maintenance people about the importance of managing a turf field and the stuff we've talked about today via safety?
I'm going to give that one to you, Pam. I think 7 inches down to 3 inches, that grass lost a lot of its leaf. And what happens?
It went to 1.5. 1.5.
Well, and what happens is when you allow grass to grow, it thins. You get fewer, larger plants. The plants just respond differently. Density goes down, in fact, instead of going up. As you lower the mowing height, density will go back up. So you're going to see a lot of just thin turf for a while. And that, of course, is ripe in Illinois for weeds. I think I'll pass it to Pam about how you talk about safety of something like that.
I've come across this scenario before where I've worked with a volunteer group that would come in once a week and mow it 1.5 inches. So it's not just about the agronomy here. It's how do you relay that message in a kind way to the ground staff? You have to just educate them in a kind way, in an open way. Just try and educate them on the mowing height that it should be and how we get there, and the 1/3 rule, and the fact that keep hammering that message home that mowing is a stress. It's a stress. And if we stress it too much, which they've done, they need to leave it alone. Don't verticut, don't aerate, don't spray anything. Just leave it alone. You may feed it a little, maybe make sure it's irrigated if you're going to a hot, dry period now. In Illinois, we're getting really warm in Ohio now. So it's going to be 80s, I think, by this weekend. If you've got an irrigation system, irrigate it, spoon feed it, leave it alone.
Yeah, especially because I don't think I doubt we're playing baseball. Maybe we're going to start playing baseball soon. I know golf is gearing up to get going, but I haven't heard anything beyond that. Is there another question, Carl, before we start wrapping up?
No more questions, and maybe I'll just ask one along those lines. Frank and I know you and I have experienced this, situations where the coach and the managers of fields maybe sometimes butt heads, and we've kind of discussed this on, past webinars. But Pam, are there any techniques that you can give a turf manager to try and diffuse maybe some of those situations where a coach comes in and maybe tries to tell them how to manage the field and they feel differently? What's a good way to broach that with coaches and managers, turf managers?
It's an art form. There's seminars that you can go to about this, managing conflict. If you've got some time on your hands, I would recommend all sports turf managers look into, leadership, getting some leadership skills, managing conflict, about listening. You listen more than you speak.
My experience is those people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
A lot of times a coach will come in and we have talked about this, and this is really, it was informative to me, Pam. We were dealing with some soccer coaches here and we tried to get feedback. One coach would be very detailed about the kinds of aspects of the game that they felt the turf was involved in and the way the ball behaved. And was very clear about, well, I don't like this, I want that. So, rolling and watering and top, the things we know we can do to manipulate that surface. And then there was another coach who said, you got to mow it lower and put sand top dressing and then it'll be fine. And so one guy was telling me what they wanted, another guy was telling me what to do. I have to I'm from New York. Everything sounds sweeter when you say it, Pam. It doesn't sound so sweet. As hard as I try, I still sound like, what are you, a dope? So I think it's hard sometimes to deal with these things. And I think the most important thing you said is you gotta okay, this person just needs to be massaged to understand there's many ways to skin this cat. And not only is it an art form to communicate, it's an art form to provide the conditions these people want sometimes. Never mind field hockey on natural grass. I don't know how much you run into that, but that gets to be enormously difficult because you've got to cut the grass so low.
Yeah, most field hockey fields I see at the rec level here in Ohio are all Pomerania for that reason. But it is an art form, and you've got to be the expert in the room, and data. Everything you say, back it up with data. Be the expert in the room.
But there's not, that's back to the safety thing.
Yeah.
How many guys have data on their hands on a pretty regular basis? Maybe they got labor and they have their budgetary things, right? But the assessment of those fields ought to be routine, and I fear at even moderate levels, it's not.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily doing a condition survey report like you'd have to do for a building. That simple data that there are tools you can use. I just listed 3 of them here. You can make one up on your own if it helps you communicate what you're trying to do. Because I think that's the way we're going to get these fields back when sports return, when they return.
Yeah, I agree. And I used to take my students to visit a field manager who I really respect. And he said, also find out where the money's coming from. Because if you can find out where the money's coming from and you know how much you're bringing into that pot, you can get a little bit of that money. So it's not just about agronomic data. It's about, find out where the money's coming from, find out how much of that you contribute, and see if you can get a little as well. So that's a side of it too.
We love to end on the grabbing for the money situation there. Pam, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It's so great to see you. Keep up the great work with the Scouts.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Hey, Carl, how about a survey, Carl? We got the survey?
Yep, I sent that link in the chat box for everybody one more time. And again, thanks to Pam for hopping on with us today. Just a reminder, we're going to skip next week, and then Frank's giving us the OHIO here as the sign off. So we'll be back the 28th with our next Sports Turf webinar. So,
Thanks a lot, Pam. See you guys.
thanks, everybody.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.